The plasma rifle bolt seared past Marcus Chen's head, close enough that he could smell the ozone burning through his helmet's filters. He didn't flinch. Instead, he kept his hand steady as he worked to seal the gaping wound in Private Rodriguez's chest, his medical scanner painting holographic overlays across the soldier's damaged organs. "Doc, we need to move," Sergeant Williams shouted over the din of battle. The Zephyrian advance was relentless, their chittering war cries echoing across the bombed-out cityscape of New Geneva. "The line's breaking!" Marcus didn't look up from his patient. His fingers danced across the portable surgical suite, directing nanosutures to weave themselves through torn tissue. Rodriguez's vitals flickered dangerously on the display, but Marcus had seen worse, much worse. "2 more minutes," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. "I'm not losing another one." The words carried weight that made Williams pause. In the 6 months since Marcus had been assigned to the 47th Colonial Marines, they hadn't lost a single soldier to wounds. Not one. It was unprecedented in the war against the Zephyrian hegemony, where human casualties typically ran 70% or higher in major engagements. A shadow fell across them as a Zephyrian shock trooper rounded the corner, its 4 arms wielding energy weapons that could cut through tank armor. Williams raised his rifle, but Marcus was faster. Without taking his eyes off his patient, he drew his sidearm and put 3 precise shots center mass. The alien dropped with a wet thud. "Doc?" Rodriguez whispered, his eyes fluttering open as the nanosutures finished their work. "You're going to be fine," Marcus said, helping the private to his feet. "The lungs sealed, ribs are set, and you'll have some impressive scars to show off when we get home." Williams stared at the dead Zephyrian, then at Marcus. The medic holstered his weapon and shouldered his medical pack as if nothing had happened. But Williams knew better. He'd seen combat footage from before Marcus arrived. The man wasn't just a medic. He was something else entirely. The retreat to the secondary defensive line took 3 hours through the ruins of what had once been a thriving colonial city. Marcus moved through the chaos like he belonged there, stopping to treat wounded Marines while somehow never becoming a target himself. It was as if the universe bent around him, creating pockets of calm in the storm of war. At the field hospital, Colonel Hayes was waiting. The old soldier's face was grim as he watched Marcus work on a Marine who'd taken a direct hit from a Zephyrian sonic weapon. The victim's nervous system was fried, synapses firing randomly, but Marcus worked with mechanical precision, using experimental neural regeneration techniques that shouldn't have been possible outside a major medical facility. "Chen," Hayes called when Marcus had stabilized the patient. "A word." They walked to the edge of the camp where the colonel lit one of his rare cigarettes. "I got your service record today. Finally came through channels." Marcus said nothing, but his shoulders tensed slightly. "Interesting reading," Hayes continued. "Marcus Chen, born on Earth, medical degree from Johns Hopkins, specialized in trauma surgery and battlefield medicine. Joined the Colonial Medical Corps 5 years ago after completing his residency." He took a long drag. "Funny thing is, there's no Marcus Chen in the Johns Hopkins alumni database. And the man whose identity you're using died in a transport accident 3 years before you were supposedly born." The silence stretched between them, broken only by distant artillery fire. "So the question is," Hayes said softly, "who are you really? And why do I have reports from 3 different fronts describing a medic who matches your description, performing miracles that should be impossible?" Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying a weariness that seemed far older than his apparent 30-something years. "Does it matter? I save lives. That's all you need to know. It matters when my men start telling stories. When word spreads through the ranks about a medic who never loses a patient. When captured Zephyrians are interrogated and they mention a human healer who makes their warriors afraid." Hayes stubbed out his cigarette. "Fear is a powerful weapon, Chen. But it's also dangerous when it's pointed at something we don't understand." Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring across the camp. The Zephyrians had broken through the main line. The retreat was over. They would make their stand here. Marcus was already moving, his medical pack secure across his shoulders. "Colonel, with respect, we can discuss my past after we save your soldiers." Hayes watched him go, noting how the other Marines seemed to gravitate toward Marcus despite the coming battle. There was something about the man that inspired confidence, a calm certainty that everything would work out as long as he was there. The attack came at dawn, Wave after wave of Zephyrian troops supported by their biomechanical war machines. Marcus moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, treating wounds that should have been fatal, getting soldiers back on their feet when by all rights they should have been in body bags. But Williams noticed something else as he fought beside the medic. Every time Marcus fired his weapon, something died. Every movement was precise, economical, deadly. And when Zephyrian forces got too close to his patients, Marcus didn't just defend them, he hunted. By the time reinforcements arrived to break the siege, the 47th had suffered only 12 casualties. All 12 survived. The Zephyrian forces had retreated, leaving behind over 300 dead, and reports that would eventually reach their high command about a human medical officer who fought like death incarnate. That night, as Marcus tended to the wounded in the field hospital, Williams approached him with a question that had been eating at him all day. "Doc, that Zephyrian shock trooper you dropped this morning. You didn't even look at it before you fired. How did you know where to aim?" Marcus continued his work, but Williams caught the slight smile that crossed his lips. Lucky guess, but Williams knew better. Nobody was that lucky. And as he watched Marcus work through the night, saving lives with an expertise that bordered on supernatural, he began to understand why enemy forces were starting to fear the mention of a human field medic. Whatever Marcus Chen really was, whoever he had been before, one thing was becoming clear. The Zephyrians had good reason to be afraid. The encrypted message arrived during the early morning hours, when most of the camp slept fitfully between artillery barrages. Colonel Hayes read it 3 times before summoning Marcus to his command bunker, where the glow of tactical displays painted everything in shades of blue and amber. "We have a problem," Hayes said without preamble. "Intelligence intercepted Zephyrian communications. They're calling you the Ghost Healer. According to their chatter, there's now a standing bounty of 10 million credits for your capture. Dead or alive?" Marcus continued organizing medical supplies as if he hadn't heard. Flattering. "This isn't a joke, Chen. They've deployed a hunter-killer pack specifically to track you. 3 of their best assassination specialists, led by something they call a death whisper. The last time they sent one of those after a human target, it was Admiral Morrison. They found pieces of him scattered across 4 star systems." Hayes pulled up a tactical display showing enemy movement patterns. Red dots swarmed across the map like angry insects. "They're massing for another assault, but this time it's different. The attack isn't aimed at taking territory. It's designed to draw you into the open." Marcus finally looked up from his supplies. "Then we don't give them what they want. That's not how this works. My men fight harder when you're with them. Morale is through the roof because they know the Angel of Death himself is keeping them alive. If you disappear into some bunker, we lose that edge." The irony of the nickname wasn't lost on Marcus. Angel of Death. If only they knew how appropriate that title really was. An aide burst into the bunker breathing hard. "Colonel, we've got wounded coming in from Patrol 7. Ambush at Grid 77. Multiple casualties." Marcus was already moving, but Hayes caught his arm. "This could be the trap they're setting." "Could be," Marcus agreed. "But there are Marines out there who need help. That's all that matters." The casualties arrived 20 minutes later, carried by exhausted soldiers who'd fought a running battle through the ruins. Marcus triaged quickly, identifying the most critical cases. Private Johnson had taken a Zephyrian barb through the lung. Corporal Martinez was bleeding out from severed arteries in her leg. Lieutenant Foster had severe neural trauma from a sonic weapon. As Marcus worked, Williams noticed the small details that others missed. The way Marcus moved between patients seemed choreographed, as if he knew exactly where each person would be before they moved. His hands never hesitated, never fumbled, never made mistakes that normal humans made under stress. "Doc," Foster whispered as Marcus worked on repairing his damaged neural pathways. "I saw them, the ones who hit us. They weren't regular troops. Something different, faster, they moved like you do." Marcus paused in his work. What did they look like? Smaller than normal Zephyrians. Black armor that seemed to bend light around it. And their eyes, Foster shuddered. Their eyes were like looking into deep space, empty, cold. William saw Marcus's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Whatever Foster had described, it meant something to their medic. The attack came at sunset, just as Marcus had predicted. But this time, the Zephyrians didn't announce themselves with mass charges and war cries. They came like shadows, infiltrating the perimeter through routes that should have been impossible to navigate. The first sign of trouble was when Perimeter Guard Station 3 went silent, then 4, then 5. By the time Colonel Hayes realized they were under attack, the enemy was already inside their defensive lines. Marcus was in the field hospital when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red. Around him, wounded Marines reached for weapons they could barely hold. "Stay calm," Marcus said, his voice carrying that same unshakable authority. "Continue treatment protocols. I'll handle this." Williams, who was helping with the surgery, stared at him. "Doc, we're under attack by elite troops. Maybe you should—" He never finished the sentence. Marcus had gone perfectly still, head tilted as if listening to something no one else could hear. When he moved again, it was with a fluid grace that seemed to bend physics around him. The first hunter-killer came through the hospital's main entrance, its optical camouflage making it nearly invisible. Nearly. Marcus put 4 rounds through its center mass before it could raise its weapon. The creature dropped with a wet gurgle, its camouflage failing to reveal midnight black armor covered in alien script. "Impossible," Williams breathed. "How did you see it?" Marcus was already moving toward the rear entrance. "Stay with the patients. Don't let anyone else in or out." The second hunter-killer was waiting outside, perched on the hospital's roof like a metal gargoyle. It dropped silently behind Marcus as he emerged, energy blade extending from its wrist. Marcus spun and caught the creature's arm, his grip somehow strong enough to stop a strike that could cut through titanium. They fought in complete silence, the alien's superior strength and speed matched by Marcus's perfect technique and impossible awareness. To Williams, watching through a window, it looked less like combat and more like a deadly dance where both participants knew all the steps. The fight ended when Marcus grabbed the creature's head and twisted. The snap was audible even through the reinforced walls. Colonel Hayes arrived with a squad of Marines just as the third hunter-killer made its appearance. This one was different, larger, more heavily armored, with technology that seemed to actively bend light and shadow around it. The death whisper. "Fall back," Marcus called to Hayes. "This one's mine." The death whisper spoke in perfect, unaccented English. "Marcus Chen, we have been searching for you for a very long time. Or should I say, we have been searching for the one who wears that name." Hayes noticed that Marcus didn't seem surprised by the creature's knowledge, or its ability to speak their language. "The hegemony offers you a choice," the death whisper continued. "Come with us willingly, and these humans live. Resist, and we will exterminate every human in this sector before moving on to the next." Marcus drew his sidearm, but didn't raise it. "Counteroffer. You leave now and I won't add your corpse to the collection." The death whisper laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Bold words for someone trying to hide among primitives. "Did you really think we wouldn't eventually recognize your handiwork? The impossible medical procedures, the supernatural combat awareness, the way reality bends around you." Its voice dropped to a whisper. "We know what you are, Lazarus. We know why you're really here." Hayes saw Marcus's shoulders sag slightly at the name. Lazarus. Not Marcus Chen. Not even human. If the alien's words were true, the question, the death whisper continued, is whether these humans deserve to die for harboring a war criminal. Marcus slowly raised his weapon. "The only war criminal here is you." The death whisper moved faster than anything Hayes had ever seen. But Marcus moved faster still. The battle that followed defied physics. Two beings moving at speeds that created afterimages, striking with force that cracked concrete and bent steel. When it ended, the death whisper lay in pieces across the hospital courtyard. Marcus stood over the corpse, breathing hard but seemingly uninjured. Hayes approached carefully. "Lazarus?" Marcus looked at him with eyes that suddenly seemed ancient. "That's not who I am anymore, Colonel. That person died a long time ago. But it's who you were." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, it's who I was." Around them, the sounds of battle were fading as the remaining Zephyrian forces retreated. But Hayes knew this was just the beginning. Whatever Marcus really was, wherever he'd come from, the secret was out now, and that changed everything. The debriefing room felt smaller than usual, with Marcus sitting across from Colonel Hayes and General Morrison, who had arrived on the first transport after the hunter-killer attack. Morrison was a career soldier with sharp eyes and the kind of bearing that suggested he'd seen every kind of warfare the galaxy had to offer. But as he studied Marcus, there was something like uncertainty in his expression. "Let's start with the basics," Morrison said, activating a recording device. "Your real name isn't Marcus Chen." "No. The identity belongs to someone who died years before you were born." "Yes." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "The Zephyrian called you Lazarus. That name appears in our intelligence files exactly once, in a report from the Kepler incident 15 years ago. A report that's classified so far above my security level that I had to call in favors just to confirm it exists." Marcus remained silent, but Hayes noticed the slight tension in his posture. "What I can access," Morrison continued, "is the aftermath data. An entire Zephyrian fleet, 12 dreadnoughts, 47 cruisers, over 300 smaller vessels, found drifting dead in space. No survivors, no explanation. The official report blamed a experimental weapon malfunction, but the unofficial word was that something had methodically executed every living being aboard those ships." The room fell quiet, except for the hum of the base's life support systems. "The thing is," Morrison said softly, "our forensics teams found evidence of medical intervention on many of the corpses. Precise surgical techniques used to maximize pain and extend suffering before death. Someone with extensive medical knowledge had turned their skills toward torture and execution." Marcus finally spoke. "You want to know if I'm a monster? I want to know what we're dealing with. My intelligence reports say the Zephyrians are mobilizing 3 entire battle groups to capture or kill 1 field medic. That's enough firepower to glass a planet. So yes, I need to know what you are." Marcus stood and walked to the room's small window, looking out at the Marines going about their duties. "I was created to be a weapon. The perfect soldier. Enhanced reflexes, accelerated healing, perfect memory, combat instincts that border on precognitive. But weapons need maintenance, so they gave me medical training as well. Keep myself and my team operational in the field." He turned back to face them. "I was very good at being a weapon, General, too good. The things I did in the name of human expansion." He paused. "The Kepler incident was my breaking point. I was ordered to interrogate captured Zephyrian officers using any means necessary. So I did. I used my medical knowledge to keep them alive while I extracted information. Hours turned to days. Days turned to weeks. Hayes felt his stomach turn. Jesus Christ. When I was done, I realized what I'd become. So I destroyed everything, the ships, the research facility, everyone who knew what I was. Then I disappeared into the galaxy, trying to find some way to balance the scales." Morrison processed this information with the calm of a career officer. "And now you're here using those same abilities to save lives instead of taking them." "Yes. The question is why? What changed?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know what it's like to be created for a specific purpose, General? To have every fiber of your being optimized for killing, and then realize that the people who made you are the real monsters?" Before Morrison could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the base. An aide rushed into the room without knocking. "General, we have incoming. Zephyrian battle group dropping out of hyperspace. 3 dreadnoughts, 15 cruisers, and more fighters than our sensors can count." Morrison was already on his feet. "How long until they reach us?" 18 hours, sir. But that's not the worst part." The aide's face was pale. "They're broadcasting a message on all frequencies. They're demanding the surrender of an individual they're calling the Butcher of Kepler. They're offering safe passage for all human forces in exchange for his immediate transfer to their custody." Morrison looked at Marcus. "Well, that's that. We evacuate immediately. Get you off-world before they arrive." "No." Marcus's voice was calm but final. "I won't run anymore. And I won't let good soldiers die because of my past." "You don't understand," Morrison said. "If they take you alive, the intelligence they could extract, the things they could learn about human enhancement programs, about our military capabilities, they won't take me alive." Marcus moved toward the door. "But first we need to prepare the men. They deserve to know what they're really fighting for." Hayes caught his arm. "Marcus, you can't seriously be thinking of fighting a battle group with a single Marine regiment." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since Hayes had known him, it was a smile without warmth. "Colonel, you're thinking like a human. I'm not human. I'm something designed to kill things that are much more dangerous than Zephyrians." The assembly was called for 1800 hours. Every Marine on the base gathered in the main hangar, from fresh-faced privates to grizzled sergeants. Word had already spread about the incoming fleet, and tension filled the air like electricity before a storm. Marcus stood before them without rank insignia or formal uniform, just the simple fatigues of a field medic. But when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hangar without amplification. "My name is not Marcus Chen," he began. "I am something that was created to be humanity's perfect weapon. For years, I was everything that was wrong with how we fight our wars. I became a monster because that's what I was designed to be." Murmurs rippled through the assembled Marines, but Marcus continued. "The Zephyrians are coming for me. They want to make me pay for the things I did during the war. They're right to want that. I've done things that haunt my dreams, things that no soldier should ever be asked to do." He paused, looking out at faces that ranged from confused to angry to afraid. "But I'm not that person anymore. For the past 3 years, I've tried to use these abilities to save lives instead of taking them. Every soldier I've kept alive, every wound I've healed, every family that gets to see their loved one come home. That's my real mission now." Williams stood up from the crowd. "Doc, you saved my life 6 times. Rodriguez is here because of you. Martinez, Foster, Johnson, half this regiment should be dead without you." Other voices joined in, Marines calling out names of friends and fellow soldiers who owed their lives to Marcus's interventions. Marcus raised his hand for silence. "The Zephyrians are offering safe passage for all human forces if you surrender me to them. General Morrison has ordered an evacuation. You have 18 hours to be off this world." "And what about you?" Sergeant Peterson called out. "I'm going to do what I was created to do," Marcus replied. "I'm going to be a weapon. But this time, I'm going to be humanity's weapon. Those ships out there represent everything that's wrong with the Zephyrian war machine. Their willingness to commit genocide, their belief that might makes right, their conviction that humans are nothing more than an inferior species to be conquered or exterminated." He stepped forward, and Hayes noticed that something had changed in his bearing. The gentle medic was gone, replaced by something harder, more focused. "I can't undo the monster I was, but I can make sure that monster serves a better cause. Those ships are coming to capture or kill someone they see as a war criminal. What they're going to find is something much worse. They're going to find humanity's answer to their arrogance." The hangar erupted in cheers, but Marcus held up his hand again. "I'm not asking you to stay. I'm not asking you to fight. This isn't your war anymore, it's mine. But if you choose to stand with me, I promise you this. We will show the Zephyrians that humans don't surrender. We don't break, and we never ever abandon our own." General Morrison stood up from where he'd been watching in the back of the hangar. "All personnel will report to evacuation stations immediately." That's a direct order. But as the Marines began to file out, Hayes noticed that many of them were looking back at Marcus with expressions he'd seen before. The look of soldiers who'd found something worth dying. For Williams was the first to openly defy the evacuation order. "Doc, you're going to need someone to watch your back." Then Rodriguez stepped forward. "I owe you my life. Seems like a good time to pay that debt." One by one, Marines began breaking ranks, moving to stand behind Marcus instead of heading for the evacuation shuttles. Within minutes, over half the regiment had made their choice. Morrison's face was grim as he watched his direct orders being ignored. But Hayes thought he saw something like pride in the general's eyes as well. Marcus looked at the soldiers who had chosen to stay, and for a moment the weight of what they were about to face seemed to settle on his shoulders. 18 hours, he said quietly. "That's all the time we have to turn this base into something that can hold off a battle group. I hope you're all ready to learn what real war looks like. No matter what you see down here, do not break. These things feed on fear and desperation. Show them that humans don't break." The ground shook as the first harvester broke through the base's main structure, its massive form descending toward the sub-levels where the last of the human forces had retreated. It was followed by 2 more, their biomechanical voices filling the air with hunting calls that had terrorized a dozen species. But as they entered the maze of corridors that Marcus had prepared, something unexpected happened. The humans didn't run. They didn't break. Instead, they stood their ground and fought with a ferocity that defied logic, protecting their wounded and maintaining formation, even as monsters from Nightmare bore down on them. And through it all, their medic moved like death incarnate, turning his healing knowledge into instruments of precise destruction, showing the Zephyrians what humanity looked like when it stopped holding back. The first harvester towered 12 feet tall, its biomechanical frame bristling with cutting tools and energy weapons designed to process organic matter into base components. It moved through the corridors of Sub-Level 3 like a walking factory of death, seeking human signatures with sensors that could detect heartbeats through solid steel. But Marcus had spent years studying Zephyrian biotechnology. He knew their weaknesses better than they did. The creature rounded the corner into what appeared to be a medical station, its optical sensors focusing on 3 wounded Marines lying on makeshift stretchers. An easy target, it raised its primary harvesting arm, energy crackling along the cutting edge. Marcus dropped from the ceiling behind it, landing silently on its armored back. In his hands were 2 medical instruments that had been modified for a very different purpose than healing. The neural disruptor went into the creature's primary processing center, while the molecular blade found the junction between its organic and mechanical components. The harvester died without making a sound, its systems shutting down so quickly that its targeting sensors never registered the threat behind it. "Tango down," Williams whispered into his comm, watching from a concealed position. "Jesus, Doc, how did you know it would come that way?" "Because it's programmed to prioritize wounded targets," Marcus replied, already moving toward the next interception point. "They see injury as weakness, opportunity. What they don't understand is that sometimes the wounded are bait." Throughout Sub-Level 3, similar scenes played out as the remaining harvesters encountered a defense that seemed to anticipate their every move. Corridors that appeared to offer clear approaches turned into kill zones. Wounded Marines that looked like easy targets were protected by overlapping fields of fire. And always, Marcus appeared at exactly the right moment to turn superior technology against itself. Fleet Commander Sathex watched the tactical feeds with growing frustration. His ground forces were being systematically dismantled by an enemy that should have been overwhelmed hours ago. Worse, the reports from his surviving units were becoming increasingly incoherent. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "Unit 7 is requesting immediate extraction. They claim the human medic is—" "Sir, they're using words that don't translate properly. Something about a shadow that kills with healing hands." Sathex studied the thermal imaging from the base's sublevels. The human heat signatures moved in patterns that defied tactical logic, but somehow they were consistently outmaneuvering forces with superior numbers and equipment. "How many of our units are still operational?" he asked. "Approximately 60%, sir. But morale is compromised. The ground commanders are reporting that their troops are beginning to fear engaging the humans directly." Fear. Sathex felt his mandibles click in frustration. Zephyrian forces didn't experience fear. It had been bred out of their psychology generations ago. Yet somehow these primitive humans were inducing panic responses in his most elite soldiers. "Prepare for direct intervention," Sathex decided. "I will lead a command unit personally. This Marcus Chen wants to face Zephyrian justice? Then he will have it." In Sub-Level 3, Marcus was treating Corporal Martinez when the base's seismic sensors detected the landing of additional craft. His enhanced hearing picked up the distinctive harmonic signature of Zephyrian command armor, the personal battlesuits worn only by fleet commanders. "Colonel Hayes," he called over the comm system. "We have VIP movement topside. Sathex is coming down personally." Hayes' voice crackled back through the speakers. "Is that good or bad for us?" Marcus finished sealing Martinez's wounds and helped her to her feet. "It's perfect. He's doing exactly what I hoped he would do, letting anger override tactical judgment." "And what happens when he gets down here?" Marcus checked his equipment one final time. "Then this stops being about tactics and becomes about justice." The command unit that descended into Sub-Level 3 was unlike anything the Marines had faced so far. 12 Zephyrian elite guards in full combat armor, led by Fleet Commander Sathex in his personal command suit. They moved with coordinated precision through the corridors, their sensors mapping every inch of the underground complex. But as they advanced, they began to encounter something that shook even their engineered composure. Bodies. Dozens of their own forces, all killed with surgical precision. Each death wound was exactly placed to shut down vital functions instantly. No wasted motion, no unnecessary damage. It was the work of someone who understood Zephyrian anatomy better than most of their own medics. "This is wrong," one of the guards transmitted to Sathex. "These killing patterns, they're not from weapons fire. They're from medical instruments." Sathex examined the corpses with his suit's forensic scanners. Each one told the same story, death delivered with intimate knowledge of Zephyrian biology. He's using surgical techniques as weapons, turning healing into killing. Sir, with respect, how is that possible? Their medical knowledge of our species should be limited. Before Sathex could answer, the lights went out. Emergency illumination cast everything in hellish red, and in the distance, they could hear something that chilled them despite their psychological conditioning. Human voices, singing. It was an old Earth song, something about standing together in dark times. But hearing it echoing through the corridors, sung by soldiers who should have been broken and demoralized, was profoundly unsettling. These humans weren't acting like a defeated enemy. They were acting like they'd already won. Find them, Sathex ordered. End this. The hunt that followed would have been remembered in Zephyrian military history, if anyone had survived to record it. Marcus led the elite unit through a maze of corridors and chambers, always staying just ahead of their detection range. But more than that, he was systematically separating them from each other, picking off individuals with the same surgical precision he'd shown throughout the battle. One guard simply vanished while investigating a side passage. Another was found minutes later with a single precise wound that had shut down his nervous system. Then another. Each death was cleaner than the last, more precise, as if Marcus was demonstrating his mastery of their biology. By the time Sathex realized what was happening, half his unit was gone. Clever, the fleet commander called out into the darkness. You're using our own training against us, making us hunt you individually instead of as a unit. But did you really think such primitive tactics would work against a commander of my experience? Marcus's voice echoed from somewhere in the shadows. I think you're confused about who's hunting whom, Commander. This isn't about tactics. This is about showing you what humans become when you threaten our wounded. You're wounded? Sathex laughed. Look around you, Lazarus. Your forces are broken. Your base is compromised. Your wounded are trapped with nowhere to run. What exactly do you think you've accomplished here? The answer came not from Marcus, but from the corridors around them. Voices. Human voices. Strong and defiant, calling out status reports and encouragement to each other. Despite everything, despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped underground, they hadn't broken. If anything, they sounded more determined than ever. That, Marcus said, stepping into view at the far end of the corridor. That's what I've accomplished. You came here expecting to face frightened primitives who would scatter at the first sign of real resistance. Instead, you found soldiers who refuse to abandon their wounded, who fight harder when cornered, who turn their compassion into a weapon. Sathex raised his primary weapon, but something made him hesitate. The human standing before him looked completely calm, almost peaceful. This wasn't the behavior of someone who was trapped and desperate. You want to know the difference between us, Commander? Marcus continued. You see weakness in caring for the wounded. We see strength. You think medical knowledge is about maintaining combat effectiveness. We think it's about preserving what makes us human, and that difference is why you're going to lose. Lose? Sathex's mandibles clicked in amusement. I have a fleet in orbit. You have a handful of primitives hiding in a hole in the ground. Marcus smiled, and for the first time in hours, it was the gentle expression Sathex had learned to associate with healers. Commander, did you really think I spent all this time just playing hide-and-seek with your forces? The lights came back on, revealing the chamber they'd been fighting in. It wasn't a... No matter what you see down here, do not break. These things feed on fear and desperation. Show them that humans don't break. The ground shook as the first harvester broke through the base's main structure, its massive form descending toward the sub-levels where the last of the human forces had retreated. It was followed by two more, their biomechanical voices filling the air with hunting calls that had terrorized a dozen species. But as they entered the maze of corridors that Marcus had prepared, something unexpected happened. The humans didn't run. They didn't break. Instead, they stood their ground and fought with a ferocity that defied logic, protecting their wounded and maintaining formation, even as monsters from Nightmare bore down on them. And through it all, their medic moved like death incarnate, turning his healing knowledge into instruments of precise destruction, showing the Zephyrians what humanity looked like when it stopped holding back. The first harvester towered 12 feet tall, its biomechanical frame bristling with cutting tools and energy weapons designed to process organic matter into base components. It moved through the corridors of Sub-Level 3 like a walking factory of death, seeking human signatures with sensors that could detect heartbeats through solid steel. But Marcus had spent years studying Zephyrian biotechnology. He knew their weaknesses better than they did. The creature rounded the corner into what appeared to be a medical station, its optical sensors focusing on 3 wounded Marines lying on makeshift stretchers. An easy target. It raised its primary harvesting arm, energy crackling along the cutting edge. Marcus dropped from the ceiling behind it, landing silently on its armored back. In his hands were 2 medical instruments that had been modified for a very different purpose than healing. The neural disruptor went into the creature's primary processing center, while the molecular blade found the junction between its organic and mechanical components. The harvester died without making a sound, its systems shutting down so quickly that its targeting sensors never registered the threat behind it. "Tango down," Williams whispered into his comm, watching from a concealed position. "Jesus, Doc, how did you know it would come that way?" "Because it's programmed to prioritize wounded targets," Marcus replied, already moving toward the next interception point. "They see injury as weakness, opportunity. What they don't understand is that sometimes the wounded are bait." Throughout Sublevel 3, similar scenes played out as the remaining harvesters encountered a defense that seemed to anticipate their every move. Corridors that appeared to offer clear approaches turned into kill zones. Wounded Marines that looked like easy targets were protected by overlapping fields of fire. And always, Marcus appeared at exactly the right moment to turn superior technology against itself. Fleet Commander Sathex watched the tactical feeds with growing frustration. His ground forces were being systematically dismantled by an enemy that should have been overwhelmed hours ago. Worse, the reports from his surviving units were becoming increasingly incoherent. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "Unit 7 is requesting immediate extraction. They claim the human medic is—" "Sir, they're using words that don't translate properly. Something about a shadow that kills with healing hands." Sathex studied the thermal imaging from the base's sublevels. The human heat signatures moved in patterns that defied tactical logic, but somehow they were consistently outmaneuvering forces with superior numbers and equipment. "How many of our units are still operational?" he asked. "Approximately 60%, sir. But morale is compromised. The ground commanders are reporting that their troops are beginning to fear engaging the humans directly." Fear. Sathex felt his mandibles click in frustration. Zephyrian forces didn't experience fear. It had been bred out of their psychology generations ago. Yet somehow these primitive humans were inducing panic responses in his most elite soldiers. "Prepare for direct intervention," Sathex decided. "I will lead a command unit personally. This Marcus Chen wants to face Zephyrian justice? Then he will have it." In Sublevel 3, Marcus was treating Corporal Martinez when the base's seismic sensors detected the landing of additional craft. His enhanced hearing picked up the distinctive harmonic signature of Zephyrian command armor, the personal battlesuits worn only by fleet commanders. "Colonel Hayes," he called over the comm system. "We have VIP movement topside. Sathex is coming down personally." Hayes' voice crackled back through the speakers. "Is that good or bad for us?" Marcus finished sealing Martinez's wounds and helped her to her feet. "It's perfect. He's doing exactly what I hoped he would do, letting anger override tactical judgment." "And what happens when he gets down here?" Marcus checked his equipment one final time. "Then this stops being about tactics and becomes about justice." The command unit that descended into Sublevel 3 was unlike anything the Marines had faced so far. 12 Zephyrian elite guards in full combat armor, led by Fleet Commander Sathex in his personal command suit. They moved with coordinated precision through the corridors, their sensors mapping every inch of the underground complex. But as they advanced, they began to encounter something that shook even their engineered composure. Bodies. Dozens of their own forces, all killed with surgical precision. Each death wound was exactly placed to shut down vital functions instantly. No wasted motion, no unnecessary damage. It was the work of someone who understood Zephyrian anatomy better than most of their own medics. "This is wrong," one of the guards transmitted to Sathex. "These killing patterns, they're not from weapons fire. They're from medical instruments." Sathex examined the corpses with his suit's forensic scanners. Each one told the same story, death delivered with intimate knowledge of Zephyrian biology. "He's using surgical techniques as weapons, turning healing into killing." "Sir, with respect, how is that possible? Their medical knowledge of our species should be limited." Before Sathex could answer, the lights went out. Emergency illumination cast everything in hellish red, and in the distance, they could hear something that chilled them despite their psychological conditioning. Human voices. Singing. It was an old Earth song, something about standing together in dark times. But hearing it echoing through the corridors, sung by soldiers who should have been broken and demoralized, was profoundly unsettling. These humans weren't acting like a defeated enemy. They were acting like they'd already won. Find them, Sathex ordered. End this. The hunt that followed would have been remembered in Zephyrian military history, if anyone had survived to record it. Marcus led the elite unit through a maze of corridors and chambers, always staying just ahead of their detection range. But more than that, he was systematically separating them from each other, picking off individuals with the same surgical precision he'd shown throughout the battle. One guard simply vanished while investigating a side passage. Another was found minutes later with a single precise wound that had shut down his nervous system. Then another. Each death was cleaner than the last, more precise, as if Marcus was demonstrating his mastery of their biology. By the time Sathex realized what was happening, half his unit was gone. Clever, the fleet commander called out into the darkness. You're using our own training against us, making us hunt you individually instead of as a unit. But did you really think such primitive tactics would work against a commander of my experience? Marcus's voice echoed from somewhere in the shadows. I think you're confused about who's hunting whom, Commander. This isn't about tactics. This is about showing you what humans become when you threaten our wounded. You're wounded? Sathex laughed. Look around you, Lazarus. Your forces are broken. Your base is compromised. Your wounded are trapped with nowhere to run. What exactly do you think you've accomplished here? The answer came not from Marcus, but from the corridors around them. Voices. Human voices. Strong and defiant, calling out status reports and encouragement to each other. Despite everything, despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped underground, they hadn't broken. If anything, they sounded more determined than ever. That, Marcus said, stepping into view at the far end of the corridor. That's what I've accomplished. You came here expecting to face frightened primitives who would scatter at the first sign of real resistance. Instead, you found soldiers who refused to abandon their wounded, who fight harder when cornered, who turn their compassion into a weapon. Sathex raised his primary weapon, but something made him hesitate. The human standing before him looked completely calm, almost peaceful. This wasn't the behavior of someone who was trapped and desperate. You want to know the difference between us, Commander? Marcus continued. You see weakness in caring for the wounded. We see strength. You think medical knowledge is about maintaining combat effectiveness. We think it's about preserving what makes us human, and that difference is why you're going to lose. Lose? Sathex's mandibles clicked in amusement. I have a fleet in orbit. You have a handful of primitives hiding in a hole in the ground. Marcus smiled, and for the first time in hours, it was the gentle expression Sathex had learned to associate with healers. Commander, did you really think I spent all this time just playing hide-and-seek with your forces? The lights came back on, revealing the chamber they'd been fighting in. It wasn't a defensive position or a hiding place. It was a medical laboratory, complete with surgical equipment, biological samples, and most importantly, tanks containing living specimens of Zephyrian biology. While you were hunting me, Marcus explained, I was collecting data. Tissue samples, neural patterns, biological responses, everything I need to develop a targeted biological agent that will shut down Zephyrian nervous systems while leaving other species unaffected. Sathex felt something like genuine fear for the first time in his life. You're bluffing. No human has that level of biotechnological sophistication. No human does, Marcus agreed. But I'm not human, remember? I'm a weapon that was designed to win wars by any means necessary. And right now, the most necessary means is showing the Zephyrian hegemony what happens when they threaten human medical personnel. The fleet commander raised his weapon again, but this time Marcus didn't bother to dodge. The energy beam struck him center mass, and for a moment Sathex thought it was over. Then Marcus stood up, the wound already beginning to heal, his enhanced physiology repairing damage that should have been fatal. My turn, Marcus said quietly. What followed wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. It was a demonstration of what Marcus had been designed to be before he chose to become something else. Fleet Commander Sathex, one of the most feared military leaders in the Zephyrian hegemony, found himself systematically dismantled by an opponent who moved through combat like a surgeon through an operation. Marcus's movements were precise beyond anything Sathex had encountered. Every strike was calculated not just to inflict damage, but to specifically target the vulnerable points in Zephyrian anatomy that most species didn't even know existed. The fleet commander's combat armor, designed to withstand direct hits from ship-grade weapons, was peeled away piece by piece like a medical examiner preparing a specimen for study. "This is impossible," Sathex gasped, as Marcus severed the neural connections to his left arms with surgical precision. "No human should know our biology this intimately." "I told you," Marcus replied, his voice eerily calm as he continued his methodical assault. "I spent 3 weeks on Kepler learning everything there was to know about your species. Physiology, psychology, neural architecture. I became an expert in Zephyrian anatomy because I needed to know exactly how to cause the maximum amount of suffering." Another precise strike disabled Sathex's primary weapon systems. The fleet commander tried to retreat, but found his leg servos had been severed with the same surgical accuracy. "But here's what's different about today," Marcus continued, circling his immobilized opponent. "On Kepler, I used that knowledge to torture and kill. Today, I'm using it to send a message." Through the base's communication systems, Marcus activated an open channel to the Zephyrian fleet in orbit. "This is Marcus Chen speaking to all Zephyrian forces. You came here seeking the Butcher of Kepler. You found him, but what you didn't expect was that he's changed. He's learned something that your species has never understood." On the screens throughout the base, the surviving Zephyrian forces could see their fleet commander, stripped of his armor and weapons, held immobile by techniques that demonstrated an intimate knowledge of their anatomy. "Your commander is not dead," Marcus announced. "He's not even seriously injured. Every wound I've inflicted can be healed. Every system I've disabled can be repaired. Because I'm not the same person who destroyed your fleet at Kepler. I'm something new. Someone who uses the knowledge of death to preserve life." Sathex stared at his captor with growing comprehension. "You're going to let me live." "I'm going to do more than that," Marcus said. "I'm going to heal you completely, and then I'm going to let you return to your fleet and tell them what you learned here." "What did I learn here?" Sathex asked, genuinely confused. Marcus knelt beside the fallen commander and began working with medical instruments, repairing the damage he'd inflicted with the same precision he'd used to create it. "You learned that humans protect their wounded, that we fight harder when cornered, that we turn our compassion into strength instead of seeing it as weakness." As Marcus worked, reports came in from throughout the base. The Zephyrian ground forces were withdrawing, their morale completely broken by the systematic destruction of their elite units. More importantly, they were taking their wounded with them, something they'd never done before in combat with humans. Colonel Hayes's voice came over the comm system. "Marcus, the fleet is moving to high orbit. Looks like they're preparing to leave the system entirely." "Good," Marcus replied, not looking up from his work on Sathex. "Commander, your troops learned something else today. They learned that it's possible to fight with honor, to protect the wounded instead of abandoning them. Some of them are going to remember that." Sathex watched in fascination as his damaged systems came back online under Marcus's ministrations. "You realize this changes nothing. The hegemony will never stop hunting you." "Let them come," Marcus said. "Every time they do, they'll encounter the same thing. Humans who refuse to break, who protect their own, who turn healing into a weapon stronger than any destruction. Eventually, even the hegemony will learn that some battles aren't worth fighting." When Marcus finished his work, Sathex was completely healed. More than that, he felt better than he had in years. The human's medical techniques were beyond anything in Zephyrian science. "Why?" Sathex asked as Marcus helped him to his feet. "Why heal your enemy?" Marcus considered the question for a moment. "Because that's what separates us from what I used to be. I could kill you easily. I could torture you like I did your people on Kepler. But that would make me the monster you came here to capture. Instead, I'm going to show you what humanity really is." He gestured toward the corridors where Zephyrian and human forces were now working together to tend to the wounded. "Look around, Commander. Your soldiers are helping to treat human casualties. Our medics are working on your wounded. This is what we could have if we choose healing over killing." Throughout the base, something unprecedented was happening. Zephyrian troops whose psychological conditioning should have made them incapable of mercy were following human medical personnel to aid stations. They watched in amazement as human doctors treated alien wounds with the same care they gave their own species. Williams approached Marcus with a report. "Doc, this is incredible. Their troops are actually asking questions about our medical techniques. Some of them want to know how we deal with traumatic stress, how we maintain unit cohesion when taking casualties." Marcus nodded. "They're learning that there's another way to fight. That strength doesn't come from the willingness to inflict suffering, but from the determination to prevent it." As the Zephyrian forces completed their withdrawal, taking their wounded and their newfound knowledge with them, General Morrison arrived with reinforcements that were no longer needed. He found Marcus in the base's medical center, treating human and alien wounded side by side. "Well," Morrison said, surveying the scene, "this isn't exactly the outcome anyone predicted." Marcus looked up from the Zephyrian soldier he was treating for plasma burns. "General, I've spent years trying to balance the scales for what I did on Kepler. Today I think I finally found a way to do it. By showing mercy to an enemy fleet, by showing them what humans become when they fight for something greater than victory." Marcus gestured toward the mixed medical stations where species that had been at war for decades were now working together. "This is what we're really fighting for. Not territory or resources, but the right to be compassionate in a galaxy that sees compassion as weakness." Morrison processed this, watching as human medics taught Zephyrian troops basic trauma care techniques. "And you think this will change anything? That the hegemony will suddenly decide to make peace?" "No," Marcus admitted. "But seeds of change have been planted. Some of these soldiers will remember what they saw here. They'll remember that humans don't abandon their wounded, that we fight with honor, that we can turn healing into a weapon stronger than any destroyer, and maybe eventually that will make a difference." Fleet Commander Sathex appeared in the medical center, fully healed and accompanied by an honor guard. He approached Marcus with something like respect in his bearing. "The fleet is departing," Sathex announced. "But first I wanted to deliver a message from the Hegemony High Command." Marcus continued his work without looking up. "I'm listening. The bounty on your capture has been withdrawn. You are no longer considered a fugitive war criminal." Sathex paused. "Instead, you have been classified as something else entirely. A protected non-combatant under the Galactic Conventions. The first human to receive such a designation." This time Marcus did look up, surprise evident on his face. "Protected non-combatant? It means," Sathex explained, "that any action taken against you or those under your medical care will be considered a violation of interstellar law. You have shown us that healing can be a form of warfare more effective than destruction. The hegemony respects this." As the Zephyrian commander departed with his forces, Marcus returned to his work. Around him, human and alien medical personnel continued to learn from each other, sharing techniques and knowledge that would save lives across the galaxy. Colonel Hayes approached with a new set of orders. "Marcus, Command wants to know if you're willing to accept a new assignment. There's a field hospital being established in the neutral zone, where species from across the galaxy can receive medical treatment regardless of political affiliation." Marcus smiled, the gentle, healing smile that his patients had learned to trust. "That sounds like exactly where I belong." And so the Butcher of Kepler became something else entirely. The Angel of the Neutral Zone, a healer whose legend would spread across the galaxy as the story of a weapon that chose to become a guardian, of a monster that learned to be human, of a medic who showed the universe that sometimes the greatest victory is in choosing not to fight at all. 5 years after the battle at Firebase Echo, the Neutral Zone Medical Station had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A massive orbital facility where beings from dozens of species worked together to heal rather than harm. It stood as a testament to what Marcus had proven possible on that distant battlefield. Dr. Marcus Chen, the name had become official after genetic records were quietly altered by friends in high places, stood in the station's main observation deck, watching as ships from across the galaxy docked to deliver patients or medical supplies. Zephyrian vessels worked alongside human transports, while vessels from species that had been at war for centuries shared docking bays without incident. "Doctor," came a familiar voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Fleet Commander Sathex now bearing the insignia of the Zephyrian Medical Corps, rather than their military. "The quarterly supply convoy has arrived from the Hegemony worlds. 15 tons of medical supplies, including the new neural regeneration compounds your researchers requested. Marcus nodded, still amazed at how much had changed. Any word from the Outer Rim territories? The Kandari Republic is sending a delegation next month. They want to establish a branch medical facility in their space, staffed jointly by their physicians and graduates from our training programs. Sathex paused. They specifically requested that human medical personnel lead the trauma surgery department. It was remarkable how the legend had grown. The story of the field medic who had faced down a battle group and turned enemies into allies had spread across the galaxy, inspiring changes that no one could have predicted. Species that had never shown mercy to wounded enemies now competed to demonstrate their commitment to medical neutrality. Williams appeared at Marcus's shoulder, wearing the uniform of a senior medical technician. "Doc, we've got a situation in Base 7. Transport from the war zone just docked with critical casualties. Mixed species heavy trauma? They're asking for you specifically." Marcus was already moving toward the medical bays, his old instincts taking over. Even here, in the most advanced medical facility in known space, there were still lives to save. Base 7 was chaos when he arrived. The transport had brought refugees from one of the ongoing conflicts in the galaxy's outer reaches, and the wounds told a story of systematic brutality. Humans, Zephyrians, Kandari, and species Marcus didn't recognize lay on medical platforms. Their injuries speaking of weapons designed not just to kill, but to cause maximum suffering. "Status report," Marcus called out as he moved between patients, his enhanced senses already prioritizing cases by severity. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation, despite the name, looked up from a young Kandari whose breathing was labored. 18 critical cases, 6 stable but requiring surgery, unknown number of psychological trauma cases. "Doctor, some of these wounds, they look deliberate, torture, not combat." Marcus felt the familiar anger rise in his chest, the same fury that had once driven him to become a monster. But now he channeled it differently. "Get me a full surgical team in Operating Theater 1, and contact Admiral Morrison. We're going to need a security briefing about what's happening in that sector." For the next 12 hours, Marcus worked with the focused intensity that had made him legendary. Each patient received his complete attention, from the simplest wound dressing to complex neural surgery that pushed the boundaries of medical science. But more than that, he ensured that each patient understood that they were safe, that their species or political affiliation didn't matter, that here they would be healed regardless of who they were or where they came from. When the last patient was stabilized, Marcus found himself in his private office, reviewing reports from the medical teams. The toll was lighter than it could have been. All 18 critical cases would survive and most would make full recoveries. But the psychological damage would take longer to heal. A soft chime announced a visitor. Marcus looked up to see Admiral Morrison, now commanding the joint defense forces that protected the medical station. "Admiral, please sit down." Morrison settled into the chair across from Marcus's desk with the careful movements of someone who'd been in too many battles. "I've got preliminary reports from the refugee transport. Marcus, this wasn't random violence. Someone in the Outer Rim is specifically targeting medical facilities and personnel." Marcus felt his blood chill. "Who?" "A group calling themselves the Purity Alliance. Mixed species, but united by the belief that showing mercy to enemies is a sign of weakness. They see what we've built here as a corruption of natural selection." Morrison pulled up a holographic display showing intelligence reports. "They've hit 3 joint medical facilities in the past month. Always the same pattern. Maximum casualties, specific targeting of medical staff, deliberate infliction of suffering." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He'd spent years building something that proved healing could be stronger than violence, and now that success was inspiring others to embrace the darkness he'd tried to leave behind. "What do they want?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "You." Morrison's expression was grim. "They see you as the source of what they call the weakness plague. The idea that showing mercy makes species stronger rather than weaker. Their leader, someone calling himself the Pure Warrior, has issued a direct challenge. He wants to face you in single combat to prove that compassion is just disguised cowardice." Marcus stood and walked to his office window, looking out at the medical bays where beings from across the galaxy worked together to heal rather than harm. "And if I refuse?" They've threatened to attack every medical facility in the neutral zone, starting with this one. The choice was clear, and Marcus knew it. Everything he'd built, all the lives he'd saved and changed, hung in the balance. The old Marcus would have accepted the challenge immediately, eager to prove his superiority through violence. But the person he'd become had to consider more than just his own abilities. "There's another option," Marcus said quietly. Morrison raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening. We don't fight them, we heal them." "Marcus, these people are fanatics. They've tortured medical personnel to death. They're not exactly candidates for rehabilitation." Marcus turned back to face his old friend. "Admiral, do you remember what I told you after the battle at Firebase Echo? That sometimes the greatest victory is choosing not to fight at all?" "I remember. But that worked because the Zephyrians had honor, even if it was twisted. These Purity Alliance extremists don't seem to have any honor at all. Then we give them some." Marcus activated his desk communicator. "Dr. Sathex to my office, please, and ask Dr. Martinez to join us as well." Within minutes, the former Zephyrian fleet commander and the head of the station's psychological services had joined them. Marcus outlined the situation quickly, then presented his plan. "We're going to do something unprecedented," he explained. "We're going to extend an offer of medical aid to the Purity Alliance. Full treatment for any of their wounded. No questions asked, no strings attached." Dr. Martinez looked skeptical. "Marcus, these people have specifically targeted medical personnel. Why would they accept help from us?" "Because that's not the real offer," Marcus replied. "The real offer is this. I will personally provide medical treatment to any member of their organization who requests it, including their leader, this pure warrior." Sathex's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned to recognize as confusion. "You would heal someone who has sworn to destroy everything you've built?" "That's exactly what I would do. Because that's what we are now, healers. Not judges, not executioners, just healers. And if we start deciding who deserves treatment based on their beliefs or actions, then we become the very thing they're accusing us of abandoning." Admiral Morrison shook his head. "Marcus, this is insane. You're talking about walking into a trap." "No," Marcus corrected. "I'm talking about demonstrating that healing isn't weakness. That compassion isn't cowardice. That choosing to help rather than harm is the strongest possible response to violence." The message went out across all communication channels in the Outer Rim, broadcast on frequencies known to be monitored by the Purity Alliance. It was simple and direct. Dr. Marcus Chen, the Angel of the Neutral Zone, offered free medical treatment to any member of the Purity Alliance who required it, including their leadership. No conditions, no restrictions, no judgment. The response came within hours. The pure warrior himself would come to the medical station for treatment of injuries sustained in recent battles. But he would come armed, and he reserved the right to challenge Marcusto combat if he deemed the medical staff insufficiently committed to their duties. "It's still a trap," Morrison warned as preparations were made for the visit. "He's coming here to destroy everything you've built." Marcus was checking his medical equipment when he replied, "Then we'll have to make sure he leaves with something to build instead." The pure warrior arrived 3 days later aboard a vessel that bore the scars of recent combat. He was a massive humanoid figure in adaptive armor that shifted between species-specific configurations, suggesting he was either a shapeshifter or wearing some form of biomechanical enhancement suit. When he entered the medical bay, every conversation stopped. "I am the pure warrior," he announced in a voice that carried the harmonics of multiple species. "I have come to see if the Angel of the Neutral Zone is as weak as his reputation suggests." Marcus stepped forward, wearing simple medical scrubs instead of any kind of protective gear. "I'm Dr. Marcus Chen. I understand you have injuries that require treatment." The pure warrior laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I have wounds from righteous battle, inflicted while cleansing the galaxy of the weakness you spread." "Will you heal the injuries of someone who has sworn to destroy you?" "Yes," Marcus said simply. "That's what we do here." What followed was perhaps the strangest medical consultation in galactic history. The pure warrior's injuries were extensive: plasma burns, neural damage, and signs of biological warfare exposure that suggested he'd been fighting on multiple fronts. But as Marcus worked, something unexpected happened. The pure warrior began to talk. "You don't understand what you've done," he said as Marcus treated a severe infection in his left arm. For millions of years, species evolved through conflict. The strong survived, the weak perished. It was natural selection, the fundamental force that drives improvement. And then, Marcus asked, not looking up from his work, and then you changed the rules. You made weakness a strength. You convinced entire species that protecting the injured was more important than eliminating the unfit. You've corrupted the natural order. Marcus finished cleaning the wound and began applying regeneration compounds. Tell me about your injuries. How did you get them? The pure warrior was quiet for a moment, fighting to preserve the old ways, showing others that strength comes from the willingness to inflict necessary suffering. And how did that work out for you? Another long pause. I am here, aren't I? Seeking healing from the one I came to destroy. Marcus looked up from his work for the first time. Why did you really come here? The pure warrior's voice dropped to a whisper. Because I'm tired. Tired of fighting, tired of killing, tired of trying to prove that hatred is stronger than healing. I've spent 5 years trying to undo what you started, and everywhere I go I find species that have learned to protect their wounded instead of abandoning them. Even my own followers are starting to question whether strength really comes from inflicting suffering. Marcus nodded and continued his work. And what do you think? I think, the pure warrior said slowly, that maybe I came here hoping you would prove me wrong. That maybe I've been fighting the wrong war. When the treatment was complete, the pure warrior's injuries were fully healed. But more than that, something had changed in his bearing. The rigid anger that had defined him was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. What happens now, he asked. Marcus handed him a data pad. Now you have a choice. You can continue trying to prove that violence is stronger than healing, or you can help us build something better. The pure warrior looked at the data pad, which contained information about volunteer opportunities at medical facilities throughout the galaxy. And if I choose to help, then you become part of something bigger than yourself. Something that proves every day that the greatest strength comes not from the ability to inflict suffering, but from the determination to prevent it. 6 months later, the former pure warrior, now calling himself Dr. Hadrian Chen, was working as a trauma surgeon at a frontier medical station. His followers had disbanded, many joining medical organizations throughout the galaxy. The Purity Alliance was no more, replaced by something they called the Healing Corps. Marcus stood once again on the observation deck of the Neutral Zone medical station, watching as ships from across the galaxy continued their missions of mercy. The universe was still full of conflict, still torn by wars and hatred. But in the spaces between the battles, in the quiet moments when enemies chose to heal rather than harm, something new was growing. Williams joined him at the observation window. Doc, you ever think about what might have happened if you'd stayed the Butcher of Kepler? If you'd never learned to heal instead of hurt? Marcus considered the question, watching as a former Purity Alliance ship docked to deliver medical supplies to former enemies. I think about it sometimes, but then I see this and I realize that the most important battle I ever fought wasn't against an enemy fleet or a fanatic with a death wish. It was against the part of myself that thought strength came from the ability to destroy. And you won that battle? Marcus smiled, the gentle expression that had become his trademark across the galaxy. I'm still fighting it every day. But every life we save, every enemy we turn into an ally, every moment we choose healing over hurting, that's another victory. And eventually, those victories add up to something that can change the universe. Outside the window, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the struggles of the beings that lived among them. But in the space stations and medical facilities that dotted the galaxy, in the hands of healers who had learned that compassion was the strongest force in the universe, something unprecedented was happening. The angel of the neutral zone had shown them that the greatest weapon was the choice to put down your weapons. And slowly, one patient at a time, the galaxy was learning to heal.